The deepest regrets are never buried by time, because the heart remembers what pride chooses to forget. Snow covered the little town of Willow Creek as thousands of tiny lights decorated the streets for the annual Christmas charity festival. Children laughed while volunteers handed out warm drinks. Families gathered around the enormous tree in the center of the square, and music floated gently through the cold evening air. Among the invited guests stood Nathaniel Brooks, one of the youngest billionaires in the country and the founder of a business empire that seemed to grow larger every year. Cameras followed his every step as reporters praised his success and generosity, but none of them noticed the quiet sadness that never left his eyes. 5 years had passed since the day his marriage ended. 5 years since Olivia Carter had disappeared without leaving a single explanation. Nathaniel had searched at first, but anger and misunderstanding had slowly turned into silence. The world believed she had abandoned him. His closest friends told him to move forward. Even the expensive mansion he lived in had been redesigned, so nothing would remind him of the woman who once filled every room with warmth. Yet one thing never changed. Inside the drawer of his office desk rested a simple silver wedding ring and a faded photograph taken during their first Christmas together. He never allowed anyone to throw them away. As part of the festival, Nathaniel agreed to visit the community center where local volunteers were preparing holiday gifts for families in need. The mayor walked beside him, introducing him to sponsors and photographers, but Nathaniel barely listened. His attention drifted toward the far side of the hall, where several children were decorating cookies around a long wooden table. Then everything around him seemed to disappear. A woman stood near the window helping a little girl tie a ribbon around a gift box, while a young boy carefully arranged holiday cards beside her. The soft light from the Christmas tree touched her face, and for one impossible moment Nathaniel forgot how to breathe. Olivia. She looked older than the memory he had carried for 5 years. But her gentle smile had not changed. She wore a simple winter coat instead of the elegant dresses she once loved, and her hair moved softly as she leaned down to help the children. Nathaniel took one slow step forward, unable to believe what he was seeing. The little boy looked up first. The child could not have been older than 4 or 5, but his eyes, the shape of his smile, and even the way he tilted his head were painfully familiar. The little girl standing beside Olivia turned toward the sound of laughter across the room, and Nathaniel felt his entire world stop. She had the same bright eyes as her brother, the same expression, the same impossible resemblance. The mayor noticed that Nathaniel had stopped walking. "Is everything all right?" he asked quietly. Nathaniel did not answer. His eyes never left the woman and the 2 children standing beneath the Christmas lights. Olivia slowly turned around. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The music faded into the background, the voices around them became distant, and 5 years of silence stood between them. The little girl reached for Olivia's hand, while the little boy looked curiously at the stranger staring at them from across the room. A single tear rolled down Nathaniel's face before he could stop it, because deep inside his heart he already knew that the family he believed he had lost forever was standing only a few feet away. Olivia Carter stood perfectly still as she looked across the crowded community center. 5 years had changed many things, but they had not erased the face of the man she had once believed would stand beside her forever. Nathaniel Brooks looked older now. The confidence that had made him one of the most admired businessmen in America was still there, but something else had taken its place. His eyes carried a sadness she had never seen before. Little Emma gently tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, why is that man crying?" Olivia looked down and forced a small smile. Maybe Christmas makes people remember important things. Ethan watched Nathaniel with quiet curiosity. The little boy tilted his head in exactly the same way his father often did when he was thinking, though. He had never met him. Nathaniel slowly walked forward, stopping several feet away. Words seemed impossible to find. 5 years of silence stood between them, along with questions that had never been answered. Finally, he spoke. "Olivia." Hearing her name from his voice after so many years almost broke the wall she had carefully built around her heart. She nodded politely. "Hello, Nathaniel." Around them, people continued talking and laughing, unaware that 2 lives were being pulled back together by a single moment. The mayor quietly led the reporters toward another part of the building, sensing that something deeply personal was happening. Nathaniel looked at the 2 children beside her. His eyes moved from Ethan to Emma and back again. Every detail struck him with painful familiarity. The shape of Ethan's smile reminded him of childhood photographs his own mother used to keep. Emma's bright eyes looked exactly like the woman standing beside her. He swallowed carefully before asking the question that had already formed inside his heart. Are they yours? Olivia gently rested her hands on the children's shoulders. Yes. Nathaniel nodded slowly, but his eyes never left them. How old are they? Olivia hesitated for only a second. They turned 5 this fall. The answer hit Nathaniel harder than any business failure he had ever faced. 5 years. Exactly 5 years since the night Olivia had disappeared from his life. He looked away for a moment, trying to steady his breathing. Emma stepped forward first. She held a small Christmas ornament made from painted wood. Would you like one? She asked with innocent kindness. Nathaniel accepted it with shaking hands. A tiny snowflake had been painted across the center in blue and silver. On the back, written in careful handwriting, were the words "Family is where love waits." Nathaniel closed his fingers around the ornament and looked at Olivia again. I searched for you, he said quietly. Olivia's expression remained calm. Not for very long. The simple answer carried no anger, only truth. Nathaniel lowered his eyes because he knew she was right. At first he had looked everywhere, but the rumors, the misunderstandings, and the words of people he trusted had convinced him that she had chosen to leave. Pride had finished what heartbreak started. Ethan looked up at his mother. Do you know him? Olivia brushed a strand of hair away from the little boy's face. She looked directly at Nathaniel before answering. A long time ago, he was a very important part of our lives. Nathaniel felt tears return to his eyes. He wanted to ask another question. The question that had been growing stronger every second since he saw the children. But fear held him silent. He was afraid that if he spoke the words aloud, the answer might destroy what remained of his heart. As soft Christmas music filled the room, Olivia gently took Ethan's hand and Emma reached for hers. Before she turned away, she looked at Nathaniel one last time and quietly said, Some things are easier to understand when you know the whole story. Olivia Carter left the community center that evening with Ethan and Emma walking quietly beside her. Snow covered the sidewalks of Willow Creek, and the children happily carried the small Christmas gifts they had received from the volunteers. Neither of them noticed that their mother had barely spoken since leaving the festival. Her mind remained fixed on the expression she had seen in Nathaniel Brooks's eyes. It was not anger. It was not pride. It was the look of a man who had suddenly realized he had lost something precious. When they reached the small white house they rented on the edge of town, Emma carefully placed her handmade ornaments beside the fireplace, while Ethan sat near the window, watching the snow fall outside. Mom, he asked softly, was that man really part of our lives? Olivia knelt beside him and gently brushed his hair away from his forehead. A long time ago, he was someone I cared about very much. Ethan thought about her answer for a moment. Is he my friend too? Olivia smiled sadly. Maybe one day he can be. After the children had gone to sleep, Olivia opened an old wooden box she kept inside her bedroom closet. Wrapped carefully in soft cloth was a silver wedding ring and a faded photograph taken during their first Christmas as husband and wife. Nathaniel stood beside her in front of a decorated tree, both of them laughing as snow fell around them. She touched the edge of the picture with her fingertips. 5 years earlier, she had believed they would spend the rest of their lives together. But everything had changed after Vanessa Collins entered their world. Vanessa had worked closely with Nathaniel's company and quickly became one of his most trusted advisors. She was elegant, intelligent, and always seemed to know exactly what to say. Slowly, misunderstandings began to grow between husband and wife. Important phone calls were never delivered. Messages disappeared. Meetings were canceled without explanation. Olivia tried many times to speak honestly with Nathaniel, but every conversation ended with more distance between them. Then came the day that destroyed everything. Nathaniel returned home carrying photographs that appeared to show Olivia meeting secretly with another man. He never raised his voice, and she never argued. She simply looked at the pictures and realized someone had carefully planned every detail. Do you believe this? She had asked quietly. Nathaniel had looked away before answering. That silence hurt more than any words could have. A few weeks later, Olivia discovered she was expecting twins. She stood outside Nathaniel's office holding the medical report, ready to tell him the news that would change their lives forever. Before she reached the door, she heard Vanessa speaking inside. She already signed the divorce papers, Vanessa said. You should let her go. She was never the right person for you. Nathaniel answered so quietly that Olivia could barely hear him. Maybe you are right. She never walked through the door. She folded the report, placed it inside her purse, and left the building without saying goodbye. By the time Nathaniel learned she was gone, Olivia had already disappeared from the city. She chose a quiet little town where nobody knew her name and began building a new life for the children growing inside her. She never told Ethan and Emma that their father had abandoned them. Instead, she taught them to be kind, to forgive, and to believe that people sometimes make terrible mistakes when they stop listening to their hearts. As Olivia closed the old wooden box, she looked toward the bedroom where her children were sleeping peacefully. Then she remembered the tears she had seen on Nathaniel's face only a few hours earlier. For the first time in 5 years, she wondered if he had finally discovered the truth that she had carried alone for so very long. The next morning, Nathaniel Brooks canceled every meeting on his schedule. His assistants were shocked because he had never done that before. Important investors had flown across the country to see him, but none of it seemed to matter anymore. He remained alone inside his office, staring at the small wooden snowflake ornament the little girl had handed him at the community center. Family is where love waits. He read the words again and again until they no longer looked like letters, but like a question he could not escape. On the corner of his desk rested the old silver wedding ring he had kept hidden for 5 years. He slowly picked it up and closed his hand around it. Memories returned one after another. Olivia laughing while decorating their first apartment. Olivia bringing him coffee during long nights at work. Olivia standing quietly in the rain outside his office on the day everything fell apart. He had spent years convincing himself that she had walked away. Now, after seeing the 2 children, that story no longer made sense. Nathaniel pressed the intercom button. Please ask Daniel to come in. A few moments later, Daniel Harper, his oldest friend and personal attorney, entered the office. Daniel had known Nathaniel and Olivia since the beginning of their marriage. The moment he saw the expression on Nathaniel's face, he knew something had happened. Nathaniel placed the wooden ornament on the desk. I saw Olivia last night. Daniel froze. After all these years? Nathaniel nodded slowly. She was not alone. He looked out the window, toward the city below. There were 2 children. Daniel remained silent. Nathaniel turned toward him. They are 5 years old. The room became completely quiet. Daniel lowered his eyes because there was something he had never told his friend. 5 years earlier, after Olivia disappeared, he had received a phone call from her. She sounded frightened but calm. She asked him to promise that he would never reveal where she had gone. Nathaniel does not trust me anymore, she had said. One day he will understand, but right now I need to protect my children. Daniel had kept that promise because he believed time would heal the wounds between them. Looking at Nathaniel now, he realized perhaps he had made a terrible mistake. Daniel, Nathaniel asked quietly, did you ever hear from her? Daniel hesitated. That single moment was enough. Nathaniel slowly stood from his chair. You did. Daniel sighed deeply. She called me once. Nathaniel could barely speak. Why did you never tell me? Daniel looked directly at him. Because you stopped listening to everyone who cared about you. You believed rumors, photographs, and people who wanted to separate you. You never believed Olivia. Nathaniel lowered his head. Daniel's words hurt because they were true. For years he had blamed Olivia for leaving, but he had never asked himself why she would abandon everything without a fight. Daniel walked to the bookshelf and removed a small envelope that had remained hidden there since the day Olivia disappeared. She asked me to give you this only if I believed you were finally ready to hear the truth. Nathaniel carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter written in Olivia's familiar handwriting. Between the pages rested a small medical photograph. His hands began to shake before he even unfolded it. Across the top were words that instantly stole the air from his lungs. Ultrasound report. Twin pregnancy. Nathaniel stared at the image for several long seconds. The date printed at the bottom was only 2 weeks before Olivia had vanished from his life. A tear fell onto the paper as he finally understood that the family he had been searching for had existed all along, and that his own doubt had been the reason he never knew. Nathaniel Brooks remained alone in his office long after Daniel Harper had left. The ultrasound photograph rested on the desk beside Olivia's letter, and for the first time in many years. The billionaire who had built an empire through certainty realized how completely wrong he had been. His eyes moved slowly across Olivia's careful handwriting. She had not filled the pages with anger or blame. Instead, she had written about hope. She explained that when she learned she was expecting twins, she dreamed of raising them in a home where love mattered more than wealth. She wrote that she had stood outside his office ready to share the happiest news of her life. But hearing him accept the end of their marriage had broken something inside her heart. She never wanted the children to grow up surrounded by bitterness, so she chose silence instead. At the bottom of the letter was one simple sentence. "I hope one day they become kind enough to forgive both of us." Nathaniel carefully folded the letter and held it against his chest. Memories that he had buried for years suddenly returned with painful clarity. Vanessa Collins had always seemed helpful whenever problems appeared between him and Olivia. She delivered messages, arranged meetings, and often claimed Olivia had canceled plans at the last minute. There had been business dinners where Vanessa insisted Olivia had chosen not to attend. There had been anniversaries interrupted by mysterious emergencies that only Vanessa seemed to know about. At the time, Nathaniel believed coincidence explained everything. Now he was no longer certain. Early the next morning, he asked his private investigation team to reopen every personal file connected to the end of his marriage. They quietly searched through old company records, security footage, archived phone calls, and office schedules. Nathaniel waited in silence, unable to focus on work. His office window overlooked the city skyline, but all he could picture was Ethan and Emma smiling beneath the Christmas lights. Late that afternoon, Daniel returned carrying a thin folder. He placed it on the desk without speaking. Nathaniel slowly opened it. Inside were copies of old security reports from 5 years earlier. One image showed Olivia arriving at the company headquarters carrying a small envelope. The timestamp matched the date on the ultrasound report. A second image showed Vanessa speaking privately with the front desk receptionist only minutes later. Another report revealed that Olivia had never entered Nathaniel's office that day because she had been told he was in an important meeting and did not wish to be disturbed. Nathaniel looked up. "I never gave that instruction." Daniel nodded quietly. "Someone else did." Several pages later came another discovery. Phone records showed that multiple calls Olivia had made to Nathaniel during the final months of their marriage had been redirected through Vanessa's office assistant. None of them had ever reached him. Nathaniel slowly leaned back in his chair, feeling as though the ground beneath his life had disappeared. Every argument, every misunderstanding, and every painful silence had been carefully shaped by someone he trusted. Daniel looked at his old friend with sympathy. "I think Vanessa wanted the life that belonged to Olivia." Nathaniel closed the folder. There was no anger in his face, only sorrow. Nothing he learned could return the 5 birthdays he had missed or the countless nights Olivia had faced alone while raising their children. He stood and walked toward the window as snow began falling across the city. Somewhere in the quiet little town of Willow Creek, Ethan and Emma were probably helping their mother decorate the small Christmas tree inside their home. They did not know that their father had finally discovered the truth. Nathaniel reached into his pocket and held the tiny wooden snowflake ornament Emma had given him. Family is where love waits. He realized that Olivia had never asked him for money, success, or revenge. The only thing she had ever wanted was for him to believe her. And now, after 5 long years, he knew that earning back her trust would be the hardest journey of his entire life. 3 days passed before Nathaniel Brooks found the courage to return to Willow Creek. He did not arrive with reporters, security guards, or expensive gifts. He left his luxury car at the edge of town and borrowed an old pickup truck from one of his employees because he did not want Olivia Carter or the children to feel that he was trying to impress them with money. In the passenger seat beside him rested only 2 things: the tiny wooden snowflake ornament Emma had given him and the old ultrasound photograph he had discovered inside Olivia's letter. Snow still covered the streets as he slowly drove toward the small white house where Olivia lived. Before he reached the front porch, he saw Ethan outside building a snowman with another neighborhood child. The little boy looked up when he heard the truck stop. Nathaniel stepped out quietly and stood several feet away, unsure of what to do. Ethan smiled politely. "Hello again." Nathaniel smiled back. "Hello, Ethan." Hearing his own son's name spoken aloud filled his heart with both happiness and regret. Ethan pointed toward the unfinished snowman. "Do you know how to make the arms stay on?" Nathaniel walked over slowly and picked up 2 small branches lying nearby. My father taught me a trick when I was about your age, he said. Together, they carefully placed the branches into the snow. Ethan laughed when one side slipped and fell to the ground. For a few minutes, nothing existed except a little boy and a man quietly building a snowman beneath the winter sky. Olivia opened the front door and stopped when she saw them together. Emma stood beside her holding a small stuffed rabbit. Neither of them spoke. Nathaniel stepped back immediately. I am sorry, he said softly. I did not come here to disturb your life. Olivia looked at Ethan, who seemed happier than she had seen him in days. The little boy ran toward her with a bright smile. Mom, he helped me fix the snowman. Emma quietly walked toward Nathaniel and held out a small mittened hand. Do you want to see my Christmas drawings? She asked. Nathaniel looked at Olivia before answering. She hesitated for a moment, then gave a small nod. Inside the little house, everything felt warm and simple. Children's drawings covered one wall, books filled an old wooden shelf, and a small Christmas tree stood beside the fireplace. Nathaniel noticed that many ornaments had been made by hand. Emma proudly showed him one shaped like a tiny house with 4 people standing in front of it. That is our family, she explained. Nathaniel looked carefully at the picture. There was Olivia, Ethan, Emma, and an empty space beside them where another figure had never been painted. Emma looked down shyly. I never knew what my daddy looked like. Nathaniel could no longer hide the tears in his eyes. Olivia quietly walked into the kitchen to give him a moment. Ethan followed her. Mom, he whispered, why is he crying? Olivia looked toward the living room where Nathaniel was carefully holding the little wooden ornament. Because sometimes grown-ups realize they made a mistake that cannot be fixed quickly. A few minutes later, Nathaniel stepped into the kitchen doorway. His voice shook as he looked at Olivia. He carefully placed the old ultrasound photograph and her letter on the table between them. I know the truth now, he said. Olivia stared at the familiar papers and closed her eyes. Nathaniel lowered his head. I cannot ask you to forgive me. I do not deserve that. But if you will allow it, I would like the chance to know my children and spend the rest of my life proving that I should have believed you from the very beginning. Olivia did not answer immediately. She simply looked through the window where Ethan and Emma were laughing together beside the snowman, wondering whether a broken family could ever truly find its way home. Olivia Carter looked at the old ultrasound photograph resting on the kitchen table and then at Nathaniel Brooks standing quietly before her. 5 years of loneliness, unanswered questions, and silent tears filled the space between them. She wanted to believe that the man she once loved had finally discovered the truth, but she also remembered how easily doubt had replaced trust. Nathaniel did not move. He understood that apologies alone could never repair the life they had lost. Outside the window, Ethan and Emma were laughing together while finishing the snowman, completely unaware that their future was being decided only a few feet away. Olivia carefully folded the letter and handed it back to him. The children know nothing about what happened between us, she said softly. I never wanted them to grow up carrying our mistakes. Nathaniel lowered his eyes. You protected them even after I failed you. Olivia did not answer. She simply walked into the living room where Emma was drawing pictures beside the fireplace. The little girl looked up with a bright smile. Mom, can he stay for hot chocolate? Olivia hesitated. Nathaniel immediately stepped back. It is all right, he said gently. I can leave. But Ethan suddenly looked at him and asked, will you come back if you go? The simple question caught Nathaniel completely unprepared. He knelt so that he could look at the little boy at eye level. If your mother allows it, I would like to come back. Ethan smiled and nodded. Then you should stay. That evening, the 4 of them sat around the small wooden table drinking hot chocolate while snow quietly covered the town outside. Nathaniel listened as Emma talked about school, and Ethan proudly explained how he wanted to build the biggest snowman in Willow Creek. Olivia watched silently. She noticed the way Nathaniel listened carefully to every word, the way his face softened whenever the children laughed, and the sadness that never completely disappeared from his eyes. Before leaving, Nathaniel reached into his coat pocket and placed the little wooden snowflake ornament back into Emma's hand. I think this belongs here, he said. Emma looked confused. But I gave it to you. Nathaniel smiled gently. You did. And it reminded me where I should have been all along. The next morning, Nathaniel returned to the city. Instead of going to his office, he drove directly to Vanessa Collins's luxury apartment. She welcomed him with the same confident smile she had worn for years. I heard you found Olivia, she said casually. Nathaniel remained standing near the door. I know about the phone calls. I know about the messages. I know about the day she came to my office. Vanessa's smile slowly disappeared. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she quietly walked to the window. You always belonged with someone like me, she answered. She would never have understood your world. Nathaniel looked at her with disappointment rather than anger. She understood my heart before I forgot how to use it. Vanessa tried to explain that she only wanted a chance to be part of his life, but Nathaniel gently stopped her. The greatest mistake was not what you did, he said quietly. The greatest mistake was that I trusted lies more than the woman who never stopped loving me. He placed a small box of company documents on the table. Vanessa's employment and every business connection she held with Brooks Enterprises had already been ended. Nathaniel walked away without another word. As he stepped outside, soft snow began falling again. He looked toward the distant road leading back to Willow Creek and realized that his future was no longer waiting inside boardrooms or luxury buildings. It was waiting in a small white house where 2 children had asked if he would come back, and where a woman with a wounded heart might one day believe in him again. Winter slowly gave way to the first signs of spring, and Nathaniel Brooks kept the promise he had made to Ethan and Emma. Every Saturday morning, he drove to Willow Creek in the same old pickup truck, never bringing expensive gifts or making grand promises. Sometimes he helped Ethan build birdhouses behind the little white house. Other days he sat on the living room floor while Emma showed him her newest drawings and carefully explained the stories behind every picture. Olivia Carter watched quietly from a distance. She never tried to stop him from spending time with the children, but she never encouraged them to call him anything more than Mr. Nathaniel. She believed trust had to grow naturally, just as it once had between them years ago. One bright afternoon, the local elementary school organized a family picnic. Parents and children gathered at the town park, sharing homemade food and playing games together. Olivia arrived with Ethan and Emma carrying a small basket filled with sandwiches and fruit. A few minutes later, Nathaniel appeared wearing a simple blue shirt and jeans, looking nothing like the billionaire who often appeared on magazine covers. Ethan ran toward him with excitement. You came. Nathaniel smiled and held up a small kite. I thought maybe we could learn how to fly this together. For the next hour, they laughed as the spring wind carried the kite higher into the clear sky. Emma clapped happily every time it climbed above the trees. Olivia watched them from a nearby bench, feeling something inside her heart slowly soften. She realized the children were not falling in love with a billionaire. They were simply getting to know their father. As the afternoon ended, one of the teachers approached Olivia. Your husband seems wonderful with the children, she said kindly. Olivia looked toward Nathaniel, who was helping Emma untangle the kite string. She hesitated before answering. He is still trying to become the man they deserve. Nathaniel heard those words. He did not interrupt or try to defend himself. Instead, he quietly accepted them because he knew they were true. Later that evening, after the children had gone inside, Olivia found Nathaniel sitting alone on the old wooden porch. The setting sun painted the sky with soft shades of gold and orange. Nathaniel held the little wooden snowflake ornament Emma had given him months earlier. I used to think success meant never making mistakes, he said quietly. Now I know success means having the courage to admit them. Olivia sat beside him, but kept a small distance between them. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, she looked toward the garden where Ethan and Emma were chasing butterflies. They ask about you every day now, she said softly. Nathaniel smiled, but there was sadness behind it. And what do you tell them? Olivia looked at him for the first time. I tell them that people are not defined by the worst decision they ever made. Nathaniel lowered his eyes, unable to speak. Before he could answer, Emma opened the front door and ran toward them carrying a picture she had just finished drawing. She proudly handed it to Nathaniel. For people stood together beneath a bright sun beside a little white house. This time, there was no empty space. Nathaniel stared at the drawing, and tears quietly filled his eyes. Emma pointed to the figures one by one. That is Mommy. That is Ethan. That is me. Then she smiled and touched the last figure. And that is my daddy. Olivia watched as Nathaniel carefully held the picture with trembling hands. She realized that forgiveness did not always arrive with dramatic words or impossible promises. Sometimes it arrived quietly, through ordinary days, patient actions, and the innocent heart of a little child who simply believed that broken families could find their way back to one another. Almost a year passed after the day Nathaniel Brooks first returned to the little white house in Willow Creek. The seasons changed, but one thing remained the same. Every week he was there. He attended school events, helped Ethan build birdhouses, listened to Emma practice reading, and quietly repaired the old fence behind the garden when a storm damaged it. He never tried to replace the years he had lost with expensive presents because he understood that time itself was the greatest gift a father could offer. Olivia Carter watched everything with quiet patience. She saw the man who once trusted rumors slowly become the man who listened before speaking. She saw him leave important business meetings early just to watch the children perform in a small school concert. She saw him choose family over pride, again and again. On the evening of the next Christmas festival, the entire town gathered around the great tree in the center of Willow Creek. Children carried handmade lanterns while music filled the cold winter air. Ethan and Emma stood with their classmates, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Nathaniel and Olivia stood a short distance away, side by side, but saying very little. They did not need many words anymore. The journey that had brought them there had already spoken for them. The mayor invited the children to place ornaments on the community tree, each one representing a wish for the coming year. Emma carefully hung a small wooden snowflake on one of the lower branches. Nathaniel immediately recognized it. It was the same ornament she had given him the first day they met again. Family is where love waits. Ethan stepped beside his sister and smiled. Mom says wishes only come true if people help make them happen. Nathaniel looked at Olivia. She returned a gentle smile that he had not seen since the earliest days of their marriage. When the ceremony ended, the children ran ahead to play in the falling snow. Nathaniel remained standing quietly beside Olivia. He reached into his coat pocket and removed the old silver wedding ring he had carried with him for 5 years. He did not kneel. He did not make a grand speech. He simply opened his hand so she could see it. "I cannot change yesterday," he said softly. "But if there is room in your heart, I would like to spend whatever years I have left earning tomorrow." Olivia looked at the ring for a long moment. Then she looked toward Ethan and Emma laughing together beneath the Christmas lights. They had grown up surrounded by kindness instead of anger because she had chosen forgiveness over bitterness. Perhaps it was finally time for her own heart to heal as well. She gently closed Nathaniel's fingers around the ring and whispered, "Do not ask me to forget the past. Walk with me and help me build something better." Nathaniel nodded, unable to speak through the tears in his eyes. At that very moment, Emma turned and waved at them. "Come on," she called happily. "Family pictures." Ethan reached for Nathaniel's hand while Emma took Olivia's. Together, the four of them stood beneath the glowing Christmas tree as one of the volunteers raised a camera. Snow drifted softly through the air while the lights reflected across their smiling faces. The photograph captured no luxury cars, no business towers, and no signs of the fortune Nathaniel had built. It showed only a mother, a father, and 2 children who had found one another again after years of silence. Later that night, the picture was placed inside a simple wooden frame and set above the fireplace in the little white house. Beside it rested an old ultrasound photograph, a faded wedding picture, and a tiny wooden snowflake that had quietly reminded them all that true love does not disappear when it is forgotten. It waits patiently for the courage to come home.